The roar of a November blizzard tore through the night over the Blackjaw Mountains, and I knew it might be my last. The wind shrieked through the gaps in the cabin's log walls like a tortured soul, each howl a reminder of my solitude. The last of the firewood had turned to embers hours ago, leaving only a faint dying glow in the stone hearth. The cold wasn't just in the air. It had seeped into my bones, a gnawing, relentless chill, and I curled tighter beneath the thin patchwork quilt, trying to shield the fragile life stirring within me. The hunger was worse than the cold. A hollow ache that twisted my insides until I felt half mad, cast out from salvation's edge, a town whose name felt like a bitter joke. I carried the child of my shame, living proof of a broken promise and a love betrayed. Jasper Croft, with his sky-blue eyes and honeyed words, had vanished like morning mist the moment my belly began to swell. He'd left me to face the piercing stares, the venomous whispers of women I once called friends, and the silent judgment of men who had once looked at me with hunger. Marshall Thorne, the town's symbol of justice, had told me plainly, his voice as cold as winter steel, "You made your bed, Miss Vance. Now you lie in it." And that bed had led me here. To this derelict cabin, a forgotten relic of prospectors who had long since given up. It was crooked and drafty, but it was a shelter, a place to hide my shame from the world. When the storm raged its loudest, a crash louder than the wind made me freeze. A loose board, I told myself. But then the door burst open. It wasn't the wind. A tall figure, silent as the mountain itself, filled the doorway, snow swirling around his broad shoulders. The firelight flickered, revealing a thick, frost-caked beard and eyes as gray and cold as river stones. It was Silas. Kane, the ghost of Blackjaw. The whole town whispered about him. A soldier returned from the war with haunted eyes and blood on his hands. They said he lived alone in the mountains like a wild thing, that he'd forsaken God and man alike. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I reached for the fireplace poker, my trembling fingers closing around the pathetic weapon. He didn't speak a word, didn't even meet my gaze. He simply stepped inside and placed a skinned rabbit and a bundle of dry, thick kindling on the floor. The warmth from his body and the damp scent of pine filled the cold room. Then, as silently as he'd arrived, he backed away, turned, and vanished into the storm. The door slammed shut, leaving me alone with my fear, my astonishment, and a fragile, flickering sliver of hope. The silent gifts continued to appear in the following days. One morning, I found a thick, soft bear skin on my doorstep. Another afternoon, a jar of golden honey. Then a small sack of cornmeal. Each offering was a lifeline, but it was also a burden. I was torn between gratitude and a creeping fear of the invisible debt I was incurring to a man the rest of the world shunned. What did he want from me? One night, a fever took hold, shaking me with alternating waves of heat and cold. Hunger and thirst tormented me. I stumbled outside, hoping to gather some clean snow to soothe my burning throat. The moon cast a faint, watery light through the snow clouds, turning the world silver gray. And then I saw them. 2 yellow eyes, glowing in the dark, not 20 paces away. A mountain lion, its body tensed to spring. It had been drawn by the scent of the rabbit Silas had left. I froze. A scream caught in my throat. The beast let out a low, menacing growl, baring its white fangs. It crouched, preparing for the kill. I closed my eyes, bracing for the pain. A deafening gunshot shattered the night silence. The explosion echoed off the cliffs. The mountain lion roared in pain, and I heard it crash through the brush as it fled. I opened my eyes. There was no one there, only darkness and the whistling wind. But when dawn broke, I saw them in the fresh snow, a set of large, deep footprints leading from the rocks, pausing where the beast had stood, then retreating back into the shadows of the forest. Silas's tracks. He had been there. He had been watching me. Pride and an irresistible curiosity spurred me on. I couldn't live on a ghost's charity. I had to face him. I pulled on my tattered cloak, wrapped the bearskin around me, and followed the tracks in the snow. They led me deeper into the mountains, to a shelter even more remote than my own. A small cabin built against a rock face, nearly invisible if you didn't know where to look. I saw him with his back to me, splitting firewood. Each swing of the axe was clean and powerful. The muscles in his back rippled under his worn shirt. I stood there for a long time, just watching. He moved with an economy and purpose that wasted no motion. "Mr. Kane?" My voice was small and trembling in the cold air. He stopped, the axe held mid-swing. He turned slowly. His gray eyes met mine, showing no surprise, only a silent watchfulness. I stepped forward, placing the bearskin on a log. "I came to return this. I can't accept it." He just shook his head, a small, almost imperceptible movement. His eyes looked right through me, as if seeing all my weakness, my fear, and my stubborn resilience. His silence was both a sanctuary and a torment. I longed for connection, to know why, but I feared the past I could glimpse in his eyes. My supplies finally ran out. The cornmeal was just a dusting at the bottom of the sack. I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. I had to go down to Salvation's Edge. I gathered my last few coins, wrapped a scarf around my face, and began the long walk down the mountain. Every step heavy with dread. Marshal Thorne stopped me at the edge of town, his horse snorting in the cold air. "Miss Vance," he said, not dismounting, "this town has no room for troublemakers. And I hear you've been keeping company with the ghost up there. Don't you bring his trouble down here?" I didn't answer, just lowered my head and walked on. At Mr. Abernathy's general store, the air grew thick the moment I stepped inside. Conversations died. All eyes went to me, or rather, to my swelling belly. Prudence Miller, a woman with a tongue as sharp as a razor, stood there with two other women. She looked me up and down, a smirk playing on her lips. "Well, look what the cat dragged in." "Thought you would have frozen to death on that mountain by now," she said, her voice loud enough for the whole store to hear. "Here you found another devil to keep you warm up there." The other women tittered. My cheeks burned with shame. I wanted to turn and run, but I needed flour. I tried to ignore them and moved toward the counter. Just then, the door opened again, and Silas Kane stepped inside. His presence silenced the room. He was tall, filling the doorway, bringing the cold and the wildness of the mountains into the warm store. He didn't look at anyone, his gray eyes fixed only on me. He walked to my side, his silence more intimidating than any threat. He took the sack of flour from my hands, placed his own coins on the counter more than I had. Then he turned to Prudence Miller and the others, his voice low and cold as river ice. "Your judgment won't keep her warm." A dead silence fell. Even Mr. Abernathy held his breath behind the counter. Prudence Miller looked as if she'd been slapped. Silas took the flour, placed a hand lightly on my back, and led me out, leaving the women with faces of mingled fury and fear. The incident at the store had a consequence I couldn't have foreseen. It stirred up a dangerous curiosity. News that the ghost was protecting the Castout horror reached the ears of Jasper Croft, and he came back. Not for me, or for the baby. For something else. A few days later, he appeared at my cabin, dressed handsomely in an expensive wool coat, looking utterly out of place in the wilderness. He didn't come to apologize. He came to make an offer to buy this unclaimed land. He said, with a self-satisfied smile, that there was a silver vein running right beneath the cabin, and he wanted it. "Ilara, you see? It's an opportunity," he said, his voice syrupy-sweet. "I'll give you enough to start over somewhere else, somewhere no one knows you." "This is my home," I replied, my voice cold. "And it's not for sale." His smile vanished. Greed turned to cruelty. "Don't be a fool, Ilara. This land isn't yours. I'll make sure Marshal Thorne runs you off for squatting. Or worse, for harboring a wanted man." He glanced toward the forest. He knew about Silas. Just then, Silas emerged from the trees, silent as a true ghost. There was a bitter recognition in his eyes as he looked at Jasper, as if he'd met this kind of man 100 times before. Jasper scoffed. "Ah, the ghost. Protecting your new property, are you?" He gave a signal, and two gunmen he'd hidden in the woods stepped out, rifles in hand. Silas pushed me behind him. "Get inside," he growled, an order that couldn't be disobeyed. There were no more words. Jasper gave the order. The first man drew his pistol, but Silas was faster. His Colt seemed a part of his arm, its report echoing through the canyon. The first man fell, a dark red stain spreading across his chest. The second man fired back, the bullet whistling past, grazing Silas's arm. He didn't flinch, turning and firing a single, precise shot into the second man's shoulder, making him scream and drop his weapon. Jasper, his face white as snow, stumbled backward and fled into the woods. Silas stood there, gun smoke dissipating in the cold air, his breathing heavy. Blood dripped from the tear in his sleeve onto the white snow. He had shown his true self. A dangerous man. I pulled Silas inside, my heart pounding with panic. I tore a strip of cloth from my old dress to bind his wound. For the first time, we were this close. The silence was broken by his ragged breaths and the drumming of my own heart. As I cleaned the wound, his skin was hot beneath my fingers, and I saw them. Other scars, older, white, crisscrossing his back and chest. The proof of a violent life, of battles I couldn't imagine. That night, he fell into a fever. In his delirium, he tossed on his makeshift bed and called out a name. Over and over like a painful prayer. Maria, ... double quotes. The sorrow in his voice was deeper than any bullet wound. It was the sound of a shattered soul as dawn broke. The fever subsided. He woke to find me sitting watch beside him, a damp cloth in my hand. He looked at me for a long moment, the defensive walls in his gray eyes seeming to crumble just a little. "You don't have to stay," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. "You saved my life," I replied. More than once, he closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he began to speak. He told me of another life, in Texas, of a small ranch, of a wife named Maria, and a little girl with her mother's dark hair. He told me about land grabbers, men as cruel as Jasper, who had come and wanted to take everything. When he refused, they returned one night, burned his home, and killed them both. He had hunted down every last one of them, and that was why he lived in exile, a wanted man, a ghost haunted by vengeance. The truth changed everything. He wasn't a monster. He was a broken man, a husband and a father who had lost everything. My fear of him dissolved, replaced by a deep, aching empathy. Our bond deepened, forged in shared secrets and survival. We didn't speak of it, but it was there in the way he'd add another log to the fire when he saw me shiver, or the way I'd hand him a hot cup of coffee without him having to ask. One afternoon, as a light snow began to fall, I saw him sitting outside, whittling a piece of pine wood. His large, calloused fingers moved with surprising dexterity and gentleness. "What are you making?" I asked. He hesitated, then showed me a tiny songbird exquisitely carved, its wings poised for flight. "For the baby," he mumbled, almost embarrassed. "So it knows not everything in this world is caged." I took the wooden bird, our fingers brushing. A warm current passed between us. He pulled his hand back quickly, as if burned. But in that moment, something had been planted in the frozen soil of my heart. I looked at him, this big scarred man, whose hands could take a life, but could also create something so beautiful and fragile. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel so alone on this mountain. The storm still raged outside, but inside the small cabin, a different kind of warmth was beginning to glow, as quiet and as strong as the man before me. I took the wooden bird, our fingers brushing against each other in the cold air. His skin was rough, calloused from years of wielding an axe and a gun. But underneath, I felt a deep warmth, a vibrancy that startled me. An electric current ran down my spine, not of fear, but something else, a recognition, a spark in the long winter night. He pulled his hand back quickly as if burned, and the familiar wall of ice returned to his gray eyes. But it was too late. In that moment, something had been sown in the barren soil of my heart. I looked at him, this large, scarred man, a ghost, shunned by the world. His hands could take a life in a blink, Yet those same hands could patiently create something so beautiful and fragile. My heart, long hardened by grief and shame, suddenly melted at the contradiction. For the first time in months, I felt I was no longer alone on this mountain. The storm still howled outside, but inside the small cabin, a different kind of warmth was beginning to kindle, as quiet and as strong as the man sitting before me. He turned away, busying himself with checking the firewood, but I saw the tips of his ears turn slightly red. A small detail, a crack in his formidable armor, and it made me want to smile. That fragile peace was shattered by the whinny of a horse in the thunder, of hoofs on the snow. Silas shot to his feet, his entire body tensing like a hunting panther. He moved with impossible speed, his Colt already in his hand in the blink of an eye. He motioned for me to retreat to the far corner of the cabin, and I obeyed, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs again. Through a crack in the log wall, I saw them. Marshal Thorne led a posse of about 5 men, all mounted and carrying rifles. Beside him was a young man with a familiar, arrogant-faced Deputy Miller, Prudence Miller's son. His eyes swept over the cabin with the same venomous disdain as his mother. Of course, Jasper hadn't wasted any time. He had run straight to town, weaving a tale of a cold-blooded murderer and the foolish woman he'd taken hostage. Silas Kane. Marshal Thorne's voice boomed, dry and authoritative. In the name of the law of the Montana Territory, come out with your hands in the air. You're under arrest for murder. Silence fell, broken only by the whistling wind and the snorting of the horses. I looked at Silas. He wasn't afraid. His eyes were cold, calculating. He was weighing his options, and I knew all of them ended in blood. He would never let himself be taken again, dragged back to a world that had stolen everything from him. He would fight to the death right here, and I couldn't let that happen before he could move. I took a deep breath and stepped out the door. The cold hit my face, but I didn't flinch. All eyes turned to me, a mixture of surprise and contempt. "Marshal Thorne," I said, my voice trembling but clear, "there's been a mistake." "Get out of the way, Miss Vance," the marshal growled, his patience wearing thin. "This doesn't concern you. This is entirely my business," I retorted, finding a strength I didn't know I had. "Those men came onto my land, with guns drawn. Jasper Croft threatened me. Mr. Kane was only defending himself. He was protecting me," Deputy Miller sneered. "Protecting you? Or holding you hostage? My mother was right about your kind." Hot anger surged through me, eclipsing my fear. "Be quiet, Billy Miller. You know nothing. You and your mother do nothing but gossip and judge people. You're too cowardly to understand." A hush fell over the posse. Marshal Thorne stared at me, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He was a man of the law, but the law was flexible in these parts, and he knew it. He also knew what kind of man Jasper Croft was. Silas appeared in the doorway behind me. He didn't raise his hands, but his gun was holstered. His very presence was a silent warning. "She's telling the truth," he said, his voice low and steady. Marshal Thorne sighed, a plume of white breath in the air. He was caught between the word of a man with money like Jasper and 2 outcasts. "I can't ignore 2 dead bodies, Kane. I have to take you to town for questioning. That's the law." He looked at me. "If you're telling the truth, he'll be released. But he has to come with us." I looked at Silas, my heart filled with worry. He looked back at me, and for a moment I saw something different in his eyes. Not coldness, but an unexpected trust. He gave a slight nod. "I'll go," he agreed. But before he turned to leave, he looked directly into my eyes, his voice low enough for only me to hear. "Bolt the door. Don't open it for anyone, Alara." He'd said my name. For the first time, the words were a protection, not a command, and they clutched at my heart. I stood there, shivering in the snow, watching them lead him away, his figure straight and unyielding among his captors. He never once looked back. The days that followed were torture. The silence in the cabin was now heavy and suffocating. No more silent gifts, no more sight of his steady form chopping wood in the distance. I was alone with my growing fear. Would they believe him? Or would Jasper's words and money win? Every sound outside made me jump, terrified that Jasper was returning to finish his work. On the third day, he came. I heard a faint call from the distance, and when I looked out the window, I saw Jasper staggering toward the cabin. His clothes caked in mud. "Ilara, help me," he yelled, his voice frantic. I bolted the door, my hand gripping the fireplace poker. "Go away, Jasper." "No, you have to listen to me." He pounded on the door, breathless. "It's Silas." He escaped. The marshal sent a posse after him. They cornered him in the old silver mine. There was a cabin. "He's trapped under there, Ilara. He's dying." My heart stopped. "Escaped a cabin?" "I don't believe you," I yelled back, but my voice betrayed me. "I swear it." "I was trying to help him, that's why I'm so dirty," he said, gesturing to his clothes. "Everyone else gave up, said it was hopeless. But I know there's another way in, a secret path the old miners used. I thought only you might know where it is, from the old stories." "We have to hurry. There isn't much time." My mind reeled. Part of me screamed that it was a trap, a blatant lie. Jasper would never help Silas. But another part, the part that had watched Silas save my life, the part that had felt the warmth of his hand, was paralyzed with fear. What if there was even a 1% chance he was telling the truth? What if Silas was dying underground while I stayed safe here out of suspicion? The battle inside me was terrible. Logic against heart. But in the end, the image of Silas being buried alive won. "Where is the path?" I asked through the door, my voice hoarse. "Behind the cabin? Through those rocks?" He said, his voice urgent. "Hurry, Ilara." With a heavy heart and a terrible sense of foreboding, I unbolted the door. He led me down a treacherous path behind the cabin that I never knew existed. Scrambling over sharp rocks and through thorny brush, we finally came to a small fissure in the mountainside, hidden by a thick pine bush. A cold, musty air wafted out from the darkness within. "It's in there," Jasper said, panting. I can hear him. "You go first? The path is narrow." I hesitated. A sudden, cold certainty washed over me. "You go first?" Jasper's smile vanished, replaced by the cold, cruel expression I'd seen before. "Don't be stubborn now, Ilara." And then he pushed me. I screamed as I lost my footing and tumbled into the darkness, sliding down a slippery slope of dirt and rock. I landed on a damp earth floor in a cramped space. Before I could orient myself, I heard scraping and the sound of large rocks being rolled into place, sealing the entrance. The daylight vanished, leaving only thick, absolute darkness and the sound of Jasper's malicious laughter echoing from outside. "Stay put, you fool. When the baby comes, I'll be back. I need a legal heir for this silver claim. After that, you can stay here and make friends with the bats." His footsteps faded away. I was left alone. In the dark, underground panic seized me, making it hard to breathe. I screamed, beating my hands against the rocks until they were raw and bleeding, but it was useless. I was trapped. He wasn't going to kill me. He wanted something far crueler. He wanted my child, and he was leaving me here to die. I don't know how much time passed. Hours? A day? The darkness erased all sense of time. The cold seeped in, and hunger began to gnaw. I curled into a ball, trying to stay warm, my hands wrapped around my belly. I whispered to my unborn child, apologies and promises that we would get out. And then it started. A sharp, cramping pain in my lower back, spreading to my belly. I held my breath, waiting. A few minutes later, another one, stronger. No, it couldn't be. Not now. Not here. The baby was coming. Pain and fear merged into a living nightmare. I was alone in the dark, with no water, no light, no one to help. The contractions came faster, fiercer. I screamed, but my screams were swallowed by the darkness. I thought of Silas. Where was he? Maybe he'd been released and was looking for me. Or maybe he was still in jail, unaware of my fate. In the town jail, Silas sat in his cell. He had answered all of Marshal Thorne's questions, telling the story calmly and precisely. The marshal seemed to believe him, but he still needed proof, or a confession from one of Jasper's wounded gunmen. He waited patiently, but a sense of unease began to creep over him. Ilara? He had told her not to open the door, but he knew how cunning Jasper could be. Through the small cell window, he saw Jasper ride out of town, but not toward his own ranch. He was riding toward the mountain, toward the cabin. Silas's heart clenched. A cold intuition, the kind that had kept him alive through countless battles, screamed that something was wrong. He couldn't wait any longer. When the deputy, Billy Miller, brought his dinner, Silas made his move. He feigned a stomach cramp, and when Billy opened the cell door to check on him, Silas grabbed him. A single punch to the jaw, and Billy crumpled to the floor. Silas took the keys, unlocked his shackles, and bolted. He didn't take a gun. He just ran. He ran as he'd never run before, his lungs burning, his muscles screaming. He ran toward the mountain, toward Ilara. When he neared the cabin, he called her name, but there was no answer. The door was unlatched. The inside was empty. A fear he hadn't felt since the night he lost Maria and his daughter seized him. He searched the area, and then he saw them. Mixed footprints in the snow leading behind the cabin, toward the old mining area. He followed them, and he found it. A fresh pile of displaced rocks, sealing an entrance he'd never known existed. Ilara. He roared, the sound of a wounded animal, echoing off the canyon walls. He began to dig with his bare hands. The sharp rocks tore at his flesh, but he felt no pain. He just dug, clawed, and threw stones aside with a desperate, superhuman strength. Inside, I heard his call. In the throes of a contraction, the sound was a lighthouse in the storm. "Silas, I'm here," I screamed, using all my remaining strength. "I hear you." His voice came back, muffled by the rock. "Hold on, Ilara. I'm coming." The sound gave me strength. I wasn't alone anymore. Between contractions, I yelled, guiding him, telling him which rock seemed to be the keystone. Our strength, one inside, one out, fought against the mountain together. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a sliver of light broke through. Silas had made an opening. He scrambled in, covered in mud and blood. In the dim light from the opening, I saw his face, frantic and determined. He found me just as the most powerful contraction yet seized me, and I knew the baby was about to be born. There was no time to get me out. "Here," I gasped. "It has to be here." In the faint light of the lantern Silas always carried. In the darkness of the earth, he delivered my child. His large, calloused hands, hands that had taken so many lives, trembled as they received the tiny, slippery new life. A girl. Her first faint cry echoed in the silence of the cave, a sound of fierce life in a place of death. Silas looked at her, then at me, and in his gray eyes, I saw something break. Awe, reverence, and an unbelievable tenderness. He tore a piece from his own shirt, wrapped the baby, and placed her in my trembling arms. "A girl," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I began to cry. Tears of relief, of joy, of utter exhaustion. I held my daughter, inhaling the scent of new life. We had survived. Silas carried us both out of that death trap, as gently and carefully as if we were made of glass. He brought us back to the safety of the cabin, where he quickly rekindled the fire. It was then that Marshal Thorne and another posse arrived. They had tracked Silas after discovering his escape. They burst in, guns ready, and then stopped dead at the sight before them. Me. Exhausted but safe in bed, with a newborn baby in my arms and Silas. The man they'd come to arrest, gently tucking another blanket around me. Marshal Thorne lowered his gun, his face a mask of confusion, and I told him the whole story. The truth about the silver vein, about Jasper's plot, the trap, and our survival underground. As I spoke, Silas stood silently by the hearth, his presence a confirmation of my every word. The marshal's face hardened as he listened. He was a man of the law, and he had just realized he'd nearly been fooled by a true monster. Faced with the raw truth, he finally chose the right side. "Miller," he ordered his deputy, "get more men. We're going to arrest Jasper Croft." They found Jasper at the land registry office, trying to file a fraudulent claim using a forged power of attorney in my name. When cornered, Jasper drew his gun in a final act of desperation, but he stood no chance. This time it was Marshal Thorne himself who fired the single, decisive shot that ended Jasper's reign of cruelty for good. The news spread through Salvation's Edge like wildfire. The story of my survival, of Silas's loyalty, and Jasper's deception changed the way people looked at us. Judgment gave way to a grudging respect and a fair bit of shame. Spring came, and the snow melted, revealing stubborn wildflowers pushing up through the cold earth. I named my daughter Lily. One afternoon, I held her and stood outside the cabin, breathing in the clean, free air. The sun was warm on my skin. Silas came to stand beside me. We didn't need words. The silence between us was now filled with understanding, respect, and a deep, quiet love that had been forged in storm and adversity. He handed me a piece of paper. It was the deed to the land, officially registered in my name, Alara Vance, by Marshal Thorne. It was mine, my home. I turned to him, my eyes welling with gratitude. I thought there was no place left for me in this world. Silas gently placed a hand on my shoulder, a familiar, steady touch. His gaze went from me to Lily sleeping in my arms, and finally to the horizon, where the mountains rose strong and true. "We don't find our place in the world," he said. His voice as deep and steady as the earth itself. "We make it, and in the golden light of the setting sun, the three of us, family made from ashes and new life, from storm and silence, found our world."